So I'm not a Christian anymore, but there's still some ideas in the Bible that I really like, especially since if you never grew up in a religious community, you might not get it, but there's passages that you learn one way and you kind of just work under the assumption that they're true. And then you learn more and maybe you don't still think the way that you used to, but those core truths still feel substantial. By the way, if you've ever felt that my content can be a bit preachy, that might be because I used to preach fairly often. Ironically, not as often as I do as a creator. But I want to talk about this idea. It's from the book of Ephesians, and Paul writes, "For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in the dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places." Now, there's a number of things to remember when reading this. First is that as Paul is writing this, Christianity is an illegal religion. He's regularly at risk of being jailed and put to death for what he teaches. He tells his followers that their enemies aren't flesh and blood. They're not the humans that they're conditioned to see as their enemies, because it can be hard to see the forest when you have a tree that is throwing you in jail. In a lot of ways, Paul is actually presenting a first century take on intersectionality. He's obviously spiritualizing it because he's living in the first century, but Paul is preaching this idea that most people around you don't need to be seen as your enemy. You can have community with these people. Now, Christianity goes on to become the state religion of the Roman Empire and many European ones afterward. And part of that is because it's co-opted by these unseen forces. And in turn, it becomes an oppressive tool of the narcissistic state. But at the same time, because Jesus' message is pretty anti-narcissistic, it often ends up being the kindling for things like liberation theology, racial justice movements, women's suffrage, and so on and so forth. Honestly, if you think about it, it's a bit of a mind fuck. The belief system that gets subverted by the state in order to try and control people ends up inspiring revolt against oppression very frequently throughout Christian history. But if you look at this in light of the way that capitalist structures in society consistently work to subvert your humanity and my humanity by promoting division. I'm white, so if you're indigenous, there's money being spent to try and get you to see me as your enemy. And there's heaps of money being spent to try and convince me to see you as someone who somehow was taking from me, which I'm fully aware you're not. I'm a guy, and there's lots of money spent to promote this idea that for me to get what I want, it has to come at the expense of women. And I don't want anything at the expense of women. I would like you to not wear perfume because then it's safe for me to leave my apartment, but that's the only thing that I want from women, other than like friendship, good conversation, whatever. And if you're a woman, there's a lot of money spent on convincing you that I want you to be oppressed. I don't. I think a large contingent of men do not like seeing women harmed or oppressed. Obviously, there are some that do, and they're very fucked up. But no, I don't. I'm gay. Money gets spent trying to convince people that if I get married, that will somehow degrade your marriage or harm your kids. And of course, there's so much money being spent trying to convince me that if I support trans rights, then that's gonna somehow harm me. I don't know how, but there's definitely a lot of money being spent trying to amplify the voices of anyone willing to be a dick to trans people, especially if that person's gay. But why is so much time, effort, and money being spent trying to make everyone feel like they are the only victim? Because if I see you as my oppressor, then I want to hurt you, right? Why wouldn't I? Life is hard, and if you're my oppressor, if you're my enemy, I should want to hurt you. I should want to work hard to recalibrate the scales of injustice so that you're the one who's getting fucked over, not me. I've been fucked over enough. It's your turn because I can buy into the myth that if I hurt you, my pain will stop. Have you ever hurt someone enough to make your pain stop? I've never pulled it off. But what happens if I commit myself to fighting against your pain? If I stick my neck out to advocate for a world where your kids are safe and treated with dignity, can you resist the urge to take an axe to my neck? If I can acknowledge that you're trying, can you believe that I was when I fall short? Together, can we acknowledge that nobody should have to work 40 hours a week in order to help fund bombs that get dropped on children? That nobody should have to worry about becoming homeless when they get sick? Can we talk with each other about ideas like all companies should have to consider the good of society and their workers, not just how much money can we make for shareholders? Can we offer belonging without insisting on conformity? Or do we live as zombies, addicted to the taste of flesh and blood?